So who has used Git before? Okay, about half. Is there anyone who's used a version control system other than Git? Okay, so it's Git or nothing. So why do we care about version control in the first place? What if you take backups of your computer every night? And what if you copy things to Dropbox? You don't need them, right? No, you still need them. When I was a wee lad and had no idea what I was doing, I wasn't really that wee. I'm talking in my 20s. But before I really knew a whole lot about the craft of software development, but knew some programming languages, I kind of thought backups were adequate. Like, the whole point is so you don't lose your stuff, right? So as long as I'm taking backups, no big deal. But a couple of things bit me to make me change my mind the hard way. So, for one thing, sometimes, even in the middle of a day, you might find you've made some changes, you made a new thing work, terrific. Let's keep going and make even more things work. And then you realize you just broke everything. Trying to implement the new thing, you broke the stuff that used to work. And to save your life, you cannot get back to the point where it worked because you don't know at which point you broke it because you weren't testing it all along the way. So maybe you broke it 2 hours ago because you haven't actually tested it in about 3 hours. It's super hard to get back to the last working state if you didn't essentially make a checkpoint for yourself at that stage. So if you get in the habit of making commits all the time, that's a lot less likely to happen. Another thing, one time I lost a whole bunch of files that had been removed from the repository, and by then those backups were gone because I didn't keep backups forever. But if I had versions of my software, those would have still been there. So that also bit me. A time that it did not bite me because I was already years into having developed this habit was I was teaching a boot camp. I was up on a stage that was about that tall, and I had a desk up on top of the stage. Turns out that desk was super, super close to the edge of the stage. And in the middle of class, the desk just went crashing off the stage onto the ground, landed on top of my laptop. The desk landed on the laptop, shattered the screen in the middle of a 7-day, 12-hour-a-day boot camp. Not my idea, that schedule, believe me. It was torture. But I had quite a bit more work I needed to do. And it was about a half hour before the Apple store closed. It was almost to the minute, a half hour before the Apple store closed. And thankfully, I had a friend who worked there, and I called him and said, "Hey, remember how you told me if I ever needed a discount at the Apple store, you'd help me up? So how about right now?" So flew to the Apple store, flew back. I was back within an hour, and everything was on GitHub, so we were actually up and running and continuing to teach the class within about an hour of the laptop having been destroyed. This monitor was almost brand new at the time, like it was like 3 days old, and it was hurt in that crash too, but it recovered. The laptop, not so much. So I was very, very glad that I was committing all along the way, because even the stuff that I had done 5 minutes before the laptop was destroyed was already in the cloud because I was doing this all along the way. So another reason why version control is just a good idea. Another thing is it serves as documentation. You want to know how you got there. In the professional world, you'll be joining projects that started before you, right? If you're going to a company and you're working on their stuff, you're probably not going to be working on a brand new project. It's really nice when you can, but you're probably going to be joining something that's already been developed for quite a while. And it can be really helpful to look back through the logs to see how we got to where we are now, what people have been working on, what each step along the way was. And there's a feature built into Git called blame, which, yes, can be used to blame, but it's also just really nice to find out where exactly in the history a change happened. So if you're looking at a file and there's some line in there and you're just like, this doesn't really seem to do anything. Maybe it had a purpose at some point, but for the life of me, I can't tell that this actually has any effect. You can run git blame, see where that line actually came from, and it'll tell you the exact commit and the commit message for that change, and you can see, oh, it was a part of making the heading change. Well, that heading doesn't even change anymore, so this is probably safe to remove. Or you'll discover, oh, okay, so if I do this very specific set of steps, this line still actually has some effect. I should not delete it, that kind of thing. So it also serves as a form of documentation. So version control, good idea. is what I'm trying to say. So that's version control in general. So then we'll talk about the specifics of Git. Questions about version control? Yeah. Subversion is one that was fairly popular in the open source world before Git. Mercurial is another one that is kind of like Git. They're both distributed version control. CVS was an even older one, concurrent versioning system. Not really used anymore. I've been using Git so long now, I'm probably not the most up to date on what's out there. But like, there's Microsoft Team Foundation services, but even Microsoft's Team services now use Git under the hood, I think, much of the time. Yeah.
So you said you use Git Blade to look for commit messages to see whether or not what the functionality of certain physical worlds are. So what happens if the commit message doesn't provide specifics?
Then you can use Git blame to go yell at that person for not having a good commit message. So this is why it's important to have good commit messages, right? Because you may be able to find where in the history it happened, but you don't have any idea what it was supposed to accomplish still. And keep in mind, if you use super vague commit messages, the developer you screw over may be you a month from now. It's not that unusual to look back at stuff you just did and have no idea why you did it. So keep that in mind, even if you're not part of a team, which you probably will be in your professional life. But even if you're not, it's pretty helpful for yourself to document what you're doing along the way. And commit messages are just an easy way to do that along the way. So yeah, it's unfortunate when that happens. So to the degree that you're in control, try not to let that happen. Did I answer your question too? Okay, cool. Yeah.
Where I change that thing. Yeah, having a huge commit, a huge commit is not helpful to you, even if it is like a descriptive message on one piece of it. Break that up.
Yeah, part of how I decide it's time to commit is if I start working on something and then I'm like, wait, this is a totally different thing than what I was just doing. So if I find that I'm really working on a different task, I stop and I commit what I've done so far. That totally happens. I totally forget sometimes because I'll just keep working and I'll be like, this isn't really that. Or I'll decide, what I've done so far is already significant enough that I really don't want to use it. I really don't want to lose it. I should pause and commit now. As far as I'm concerned, committing early and often is a good thing. Way better than the alternative.
If you find yourself using and in the message,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Troy.
Is it possible, like, can I commit multiple times before I push?
Mm-hmm.
And then it does all this?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get into the specifics of how Git works.
That situation where, like, you're doing two things, I would imagine I would probably just, like, Control-Z, commit, and then, like, undo.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that works. Yeah.
Are there memory or language limits when you can push to GitHub?
Not really. But you don't want to put like terabytes worth of stuff in there.
sometimes if like the node modules folder isn't ignored, you can't push that.
I don't know if you can't push, but it's gonna take a while. But so I mean, GitHub is just a service. It really has nothing to do with Git itself. You know, it's not like GitHub develops the Git version control system. Again, we'll get into the specifics of that here in a sec. But if you find that you're putting huge files in there, then those files, they may be things like images and stuff, and you may want things like images and videos and whatnot to live outside your repository and to be managed totally separate from your code, so that your repository doesn't get huge. Because the thing about Git, one of the things about Git, is that everyone who has a copy of the repository has the entire history. So they're all going to have all those huge files, which may not be what you intend. So if you find that you actually have an enormous repository, some of those things may not really be appropriate to be in the repository, but it depends. Probably your source code isn't going to get that big unless you're like developing an operating system or something. The code itself. Any other questions about version control in general and not specifically Git? Okay, cool.